Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it is Friday in the Riv, TGIF. And I guess today's the day Mr. Sympathy, Mr. Empathetic uh, is going to wipe out the homeless camp, right?
Well, I mean, he did say he was going to do it in a couple of days or something like that. So I haven't heard
And
anything yet.
who cares about them? He got enough press when he said he gave the guy some money,
Yeah,
and now he can be we've got bipolar Paul, so he can be bad Paulie now, and nobody cares. Oh, but he's gonna make sure they get treated. Bull. The irony is, look, he's got more important things to worry about. Did you see that interview with Biden that the left wing media is going bananas about because he basically insulted everybody, the voters, and lied. He said she said inflation's like 30% on food and stuff like this, and he says to her, like, no, it isn't. All the numbers are wrong. And he said that everybody's got money, they just have to spend it. I guess he hasn't figured out that over 60% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, I look, he's got an excuse. He's delusionary. I mean, he's got serious mental issues. He's got dementia. There's no doubt about it. He can't put a sentence together. He can't read. But to try to say that while he continues to just blow money and then blame everybody else, it's the companies. Look what they're doing. Shrinkflation.
that's
You
right.
see the size of my Snickers? He didn't realize it. He got one of those,
The minis,
the Snickers bits or something,
the
right?
fun
Right?
size pack.
He thought they shrunk it, but they do. We see shrinkflation all over the place.
That's right.
But he's blaming the companies, the greedy corporations. Well, guess what, Joe? We know you're in government now because you don't care about money because you just take everybody else's. What do you expect companies to do? You're increasing the price of producing their product by 30, 40, 50% more in some cases. They have to stay in business. They have to sell their product. So, like any business, they have a choice. Give you less or charge you more. So most of them try to keep the prices down so they give you less. You go to a restaurant, you own a restaurant, potatoes go up, vegetables go up, meat go up, seafood goes up. You got to pay your help. Price of transporting all these things go up. You got to stay in business. You don't stay in business, you don't have a paycheck. So you're forced to do it. It's kind of like Paul. Paul wants you to approve a 2.5 override for Diamond. But apparently he's in denial that we're broke, even though his CFO said we can't borrow any up to 33. But Paul says we don't need to. We'll just take your money. Give me an override. They're still negotiating contracts with pretty good pay raises. Why? And look, I believe everybody should get pay raises when you can afford them. Look, I negotiated for over nearly 25 years. We had many a contract where we took a 0 for a year because we understood that You make a choice. You take a zero or something's got to be cut. But we took zeros. And we knew if we went to arbitration, we couldn't prove the city's ability to pay. But Paul doesn't care. Is there any attempt, even though in that November 29th retirement board meeting, when our CFO said they can't afford the contracts they already have, and she admitted it, they're still putting them out. They're still negotiating contracts with money on the table. And she said in that meeting also they were going to ask for concessions. I know there's a union right now bargaining that just got a pay raise not too long ago that reopened and has got 10% on the table. 10%. 10%. I know even the dummy governor that we have. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, our dummy governor is already talking about having rotating furloughs next year for state employees. Non-essential, most likely. And that's a big key. Not fire and police and public safety, but non-essential employees, giving them furloughs. It's a common practice. A lot of you aren't old enough to remember, but when we had a serious inflation issue, not even as bad as today, Richard Nixon put a national freeze on pay raises. For the government. We had wage and price controls implemented and a pay freeze because we're running out of money. But Paulie Pockets never runs out of money. He blew $88 million in ARPA funds. He's blown every single dime you give him. He said Durfee was going to be paid by the time we got the bill, and now we don't even know how much we pay. And now he wants you to do it again. And as I turn it back to you, CJ, I'll close by saying he wants you to do it again. He wants you to give him another override or exclusion or whatever. And what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Do you think giving him money than what he's already taken in your taxes and debt overrides and increases in your water rates is going to help this city? No, it's just going to make him give out pay raises to his friends and make you poorer. And with that, CJ, back to you.
I've got to make a correction to something you said. You said he wants a Prop 2.5 override for Diamond. Let's get this clear because I don't want people to be confused. Okay? It is not about Diamond. It is about the fact that the mayor overspent his money. He spent too much money, and when he did, now he can't afford to pay the bill. Sooner or later, you got to pay the ban. It's that simple. But he's trying to sell it for Diamond. Diamond's already in the construction phase. Okay? It's being done. The city council removed your rights to vote for the construction of Diamond and to bring it before the voters of all 4 communities. The city council removed that right from you. Joe Camara removed the right to have a debt exclusion, which they couldn't get anyhow because it's not a debt exclusion. It's not a debt. It's an assessment. So, and Joe Camara said, we've been able to build these schools without a debt exclusion until this Durfee. I remember these things.
You do, CJ. But let me say, it's not really a correction. it is a clarification because
Yes,
you see, we have to explain this to people from now to that debt, whatever it is, because remember, Paul's talked about debt exclusions, 2.5 overrides. They just try to confuse the people.
and that's exactly what he's
This is
doing.
their MO. He wants to confuse everybody because most people, and look, I don't expect them to know. People don't know that a 2.5 override is completely different than a debt exclusion.
That's right.
It is
Why?
a debt exclusion lets you raise tax money in excess of Prop 2.5, which says you need something like this, but it's only for a specific reason. We know that. You know that. You know, but you said on this show before he found out he couldn't even put the thing on a ballot in November.
Right.
So, I mean, see, this is the problem, CJ. We tell everybody that watches us all the time, educate yourself. Read about things. Read about these things. And yeah, you're right, Jeff. They're getting confused, but all they shouldn't be confused about is no matter how much money we give them, they just keep asking for more, and they never make an attempt to control the budget. Remember I told you about a book that came out on May 7th, and I ordered it on May 7th. Here it is. The End of Everything by Victor David Hanson. And I'm not getting any money if you buy this. I paid for this too.
We're not getting a commission.
How Wars Descend into Annihilation. This is a book about how countries, some of the greatest countries in history, and Victor David Hanson is a eminent professor and a great historian and a brilliant man, how some of these great empires just descended after 600-800 years, 1,000 years, far more than America. But we see America going this way now because this is what happens. We've got small town Fall River doing the same thing that Joe Biden's doing on a national level, spending trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, driving up inflation, denying it, wanting you to ignore the fact that you can't afford food, blaming you, which is, although I got to say one thing, Fall River is far better at blaming everybody else for what happens to them than even Joe Biden. Because no matter what they say about Fall River, they're all lying. It's always their fault. It's not their fault. Educational system sucks, shut up. That's a lie. We're ranked by everybody at the bottom, shut up, it's a lie. And that's the problem. People get confused because they don't look at the bottom line. Look, the bottom line is he had $88 million opera money, didn't do anything with it. You got the debt exclusion for Durfee that he said, CJ and I were at every single meeting opposing the debt exclusion. Not education, the debt exclusion. And we said, this is bullshit. He keeps telling you by 23, don't worry about it. It won't even be an issue. It's an issue. And we don't even know how much we're paying. And then they gave a number. But now nobody knows the number. He wants you to give him more money in a city that nobody knows how much money we got. And when he did an audit, the auditor said, this city's a mess. It's not really an audit. I mean, people, you can't keep doing this. He doesn't care. Yeah, maybe in another year, you'll be the guy he's pushing out of a homeless camp. Because at this rate, there are going to be a lot of homeless people in Fall River. And with that, CJ, back to you.
Well, you're right. I mean, and Jeff brought up a good point. People are already getting confused. Okay? And of course, Jeff, what's he going to threaten? Police and fire. Always police and fire. If he doesn't get the things the way he wants, it's police and fire. What happens with the city council? It's the police and fire. We're not going to talk about the 400 people he hired. We're not going to talk about those people. We can't fire any of those. We can't get rid of some of those people. We can't lay them off. And guess what? In this city, even if we lay them off, we still got to pay them. We're a self-insurer. That means when the city lays them off, the city's got to pay the unemployment. So we really don't have major savings. So when he cuts police and fire, not only is your safety put in jeopardy, but your bank account's still shrinking. We can't afford it. We can't. And whether he calls this a Prop 2.5 override, a debt exclusion, I'm ripping the money out of your pockets, I'm stealing your wallet, whatever he calls it, it's more taxation. It's overtaxation. Don't let them tell you a line of fruits that this is to pay for Diamond. This is to pay for the mayor's overspending. I watched a video that Chip sent me this week on the New Bedford Retirement Board. And one of the retirement board members ripped apart the mayor of New Bedford. Ripped him apart. I wish I had the video. But he ripped him apart. And what did he talk about? He says, I know we can't use ARPA funds for the retirement system. It's forbidden. But giving $1 million to a developer? And you know how the financial officer justified it? Well, that's economic development. That's a blighted property. It will generate taxes. It will bring people here. They will bring money here. Doesn't that sound like Ken Fiola? Doesn't that sound like every time we give a tip out that, this tip isn't going to be a bad thing? A tip is a bad thing. We have gone through this over and over and over and over again. We've read the studies. We've read the reports. We've sent those studies and reports to the city council. We've sent them to previous mayors that say TIFs are detrimental to a community. Tax incentive programs do not work for communities, especially like Fall River. Because what happens is they come in, they get their TIF, and at the end of their TIF, they either A, apply for a new one, or B, they jump ship. I'll give you a good idea, give you a good point. Lidolier. Remember Lidolier? They're gone. They're not here anymore. They're gone.
Very large employer, too.
Yes,
But
they were.
look, Jeff is talking about this guy. Jeff, listen. Anybody who writes a podcast or talks on a podcast that we don't need affordable housing, you immediately shut off the podcast and know the guy's an imbecile. Because affordable housing is critical in Fall River, because when the rest of the state and the country gets a cold, we get pneumonia. And the entire country, one of the foremost problems that we are facing nationwide is affordable housing because of this inflation and the rents and everything else. So listen, you got to discount those people completely. And that's the problem.
Well, I think he's talking about the article that was on the front page of the Herald News yesterday about Tony Cordero and bringing light back to downtown.
Yeah,
he's going to bring light back to downtown.
Yeah, well, they've been bringing life back to downtown for 50 years. And I know one thing, Tony Cordero, she just keeps getting richer, and I don't see many life forms except alien life forms down there. So the reality is that's all horse shit. Yeah. And the thing is that guy that wrecked them in New Bedford, and he really wrecked them. He said they keep spending money and imposing a debt on the retirement system. But listen, the CFO was lying. Oh, it brings in taxes. No, it doesn't. Not initially. Because guess what? 90% of those people that they give the money to also get tips. And guess who pays 80% of their taxes? You do. Not them. This is the problem. The rich get richer. Oh yeah, development. Do those buildings, all this market rate housing, that got all these TIFs? And even if they did pay taxes, we had a city at one time where everybody was working. It was a little bit better off, but it was still a poor city. The problem is, isn't it ironic that now, no matter how much development and how much taxes you get into these communities like Fall River and New Bedford, that we're always broke? They don't fix anything except making guys like Cadero, guys like Viola richer. I've been around a long time. I lived in this city when this city had reasonable taxes, had stores, had small businesses everywhere on Pleasant Street and South Main. And as far as police and fire, Jeff, you're right. They always threaten that to scare the people. Well, the people also have the right to sue a city if they don't provide public safety. It has been done in other communities and they've won. And you know what else you got the right to do? Get your ass out of it. Not you, and I'm speaking rhetorically to you guys, because you guys watch and pay attention. But the 40,000 people that are suffering from the malaise and apathy that don't go out to vote, it's real easy. You don't want them to cut police and fire. Tell the city council, if you don't find a different place to cut, do not let the mayor cut police and fire. We will run you out of office. You're done. And then have some people run. Throw their asses out of office. Because you cut police and fire, you're not only hurting the safety of the community, but now you're creating a greater financial burden on the city, because you know what happens when you lay these guys off? They go find a job somewhere else. When they did that to the fire department, the first time they laid everybody off, almost everybody came back. The second time they laid firefighters off, most of them stayed away. They stayed in Brookline. They stayed in Newton. They stayed in the other communities because firefighters and police have hiring in other communities. How difficult do you think it is to get a job as a fully trained police officer? Especially a young one, because they don't lay off the senior guys, they lay off the junior guys. So you get a young cop that's still got 20, 25 years left to serve his community. He goes over, he can get a job anywhere. They're dying for police in this country. And then we've got to hire new people, deal with all the money it takes to get these people trained and on the job, and then they're inexperienced and they can't work alone for a while. I mean, listen, I'm saying something here that is totally flies in the face of government. I'm speaking logically. I look at things objectively. Government never does. We're going to lay fire on police. Well, we're only imposing a greater burden on this city. They're already complaining some of the cops are leaving. I know one police officer applied at another department, and it got over to the chief, and the chief wanted to know and called that chief, and the chief wouldn't share any information because people are even leaving now to go to other communities. And the money isn't going to keep them here, because no matter how much you pay them, they can get paid no matter where they go. And I'll tell you, I mean, listen, This is an absolute clown show. This administration, look, all administration we've had their problem. I have never seen anything like this. You can tell this guy got his whole life in political jobs where they don't give a shit. The taxpayers pay their salary and they just keep buying their votes like Biden. Pay their student loans off, they'll vote for me. Give them stimulus checks. Just keep giving money and worry and let the government worry later on when they destroy the country. And Coogan says, we don't care about this. We can't borrow any money, but we're just going to keep raiding your pocketbook until you say no, or you're living in a homeless camp. And that's where we're going. That's where we're going. They are the biggest hypocrites in the world. The only place they're attacking is the retirement system. They tried it in New Bedford. They didn't get away with it, and they got pissed off because that fifth member got hired and he voted the right way. They tried to screw them out of their COLA. They get more than we do because they got $14,000 base, but they only get $400 and some a year. Tried to screw them out while they're handing out pay raises all over, giving money, but they're going to screw the retirees because they don't have the resources to fight everything. And that's despicable. But they're just going to keep doing it, people. If you let somebody urinate on your leg and then you let them convince you it's raining, and then defecate on your head and let them convince you that it's a mudslide, they're going to keep doing it. There's only one solution. We're not here just to complain. We're here to give you facts. There's only one solution, and we've been saying it since we've been on the air. Get your ass to the polls and vote. Get these bums out of there. With that, CJ.
Very interesting. I mean, I can remember, you remember Bob Correa. When he had that, and the only department that didn't take the pay cut was the fire department. And they stood up. They stood up against the tyrants. Okay? And Bob Correa was actually a good administrator, a good mayor. The problem was he had a piss poor attitude to people. He had an attitude with people. And that's what people couldn't get past. He wasn't a well-liked guy because of his attitude, because Fall River is not the State House. And that was the problem there. But, I want to remind you that even though Fall River isn't the State House, Fall River is a community of people that will, when given the right igniter, that will turn around and say, I'm done with this. No more. I'm sick and tired of it. And you need to go away. You look at what they did with the recall. They've had a couple of recalls since then. None of them have been successful. But again, that is the way it is. So, and the other thing that I want you to talk about, Chip, is if they lay off fire, we're not going to save any money because of overtime, correct? Is that what's going to happen?
Well, yeah. Well, it'll cost more overtime, and also it will also result in a reduction of manpower, probably on the shifts. But they will still need overtime, obviously. And like I said, none of these things are solutions. You have to tighten your belt. And public safety should always be a priority. Okay? It is, not the first thing. It's got to be the last thing. Correa had Correa knew we needed to begin to tighten our belt. So he made those cuts, and if he would have stayed in, he probably would have turned the city around, because he understood that we had to live within a budget. But this guy doesn't care about budgets, and this is what normally they do historically. Just like what he did with EMS. He just said, screw it. We're going to put them where it's convenient for them rather than what it's better for public safety. And then they tried to con everybody by saying, like I said, they just misrepresent. They tell these half-truths. Well, they're going to still be within the response time. Well, the response time is fairly high, especially, and I don't have to tell you, CJ, because obviously you were, involved in cardiac nursing.
Oh yeah.
And I read right from the International Association of Firefighters manual on fire-based EMS how critical it is in a cardiac arrest to get advanced care within 2 or 3 minutes. And 2 or 3 minutes can mean the difference between life, death, or permanent brain damage.
Right.
But nobody gave a shit. They just went there and the bobbleheads in the council went, whatever you want, Paulie. We don't care unless it's your mother or your brother. And I think Bob Correa would have had a problem with that, because I remember a time when his mother had a medical emergency, and I think there was the response time came into question, but it wasn't something. It was response time was unavoidable because they had to send an ambulance from another area. So he understood that these things are critical. But Paul doesn't care, and they lie. Oh, it's within the response time. That's like when Dawson went in front of the city council and said, oh, we don't need to keep the recommended by the National Fire Protection Association men on a truck. We can run short-handed because we're going to send some other trucks. And I'm going to give you the analogy that I used, which was he was full of shit. But, okay, this is what he's saying. That we're going to send some, we're going to have 3 men on a truck, and if we need an extra 6 men, we're going to send 2 more trucks. Which, besides stripping another neighborhood of its fire protection, they're getting there 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes, I don't know. Because when you get there and you start working on a fire, then you need more help, and you call. It takes. Now you got to call. Then they got to move from a location. So the analogy I used in front of the council, and of course it did absolutely no good. It was a 5-4 vote. I said, this is what he's saying to you people. Let's play a football game. We have 11 people on the field. You're going to play against us, but you're going to start with 2 people on the field. But as the game goes along, you'll ultimately get up to 11. Do you see a problem there? By the time you get 11 people on the field, you're behind 175 to nothing. And then I showed them the actual pictures of a fire propagation in a waste paper basket that in 3 minutes had the entire room engulfed. That's public safety. The faster you get there, the better the result. But these people don't care, and they will lie to you. They're propaganda. And shame on the people who go in front of that council and tell a half-truth about public safety, because They're supposed to have a commitment to saving lives. And anybody that tells you that it's okay in a cardiac incident to get there 2 minutes later or 3 minutes later and say it's not a factor is a freaking liar. They wouldn't say it wasn't a factor. They just said it's within the response time. Well, the response time is the maximum. If you want true public safety, you should be looking for the minimum response. That's why they had stations placed so you could get there within 3 to 4 minutes after receipt of the alarm. And, the whole thing is bullshit, CJ. You're right. It's going to cost, it's not going to save that much money. Yeah, it's going to save money ultimately because when they lay people off, they save the benefits, et cetera, et cetera. But they're going to pay a whole bunch of things in overtime, but it's the danger of public safety. I mean, you know that, CJ. You know the fire I went to that your own aunt threw 2 babies out of a 3rd floor window.
Yep.
And I'm going to tell you something. That was on Montauk Street, I believe, right?
Yes, it was. It was right across the street from the National Guard Armory.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you something. When we got there, your aunt had disappeared behind a wall of flame after throwing 2 babies out the window. And Montauk Street is not too far away from the Globe Fire Station, and that's where I came from. And I got there in a minute and a half with the apparatus from the Globe, with engine 5, ladder 2, and we got them working immediately, and we were fortunate enough to rescue your aunt. If we would have got there 2 minutes later, she would have been dead, and those 2 babies wouldn't have survived. So don't give me that horse shit, Paul. Walk around dirty with your hands in your pocket, high-fiving your kids, and then say you're going to cut public safety. I've been there, and I've done that. And people like you disgust me. With that, back to you.
You ever notice that? I mean, I remember, and I could be wrong, but I remember when the city was in financial straits. I mean, we're going way back. We're going back to the 70s, maybe the early 80s. They would cut from the school department. Because remember, the school department makes up most of the budget. So they would cut from the school department. We've already got a failing school system, so what's a few more cuts they're going to make? The more money we throw at that place, the less results we get. And Paul can turn and say, well, now we got a couple of challenges. One of the challenges we have is we got to find a new superintendent. And he put out a survey of what people should look for in a new superintendent. You know what I think people should do? Answer the survey. Take politics out of the hiring of the superintendent. Keep the mayor out of the selection process. Keep the school committee out of the election process. Let the people have a say. Bring the people in. Not the mayor's appointees, the people. The regular people. Not people who are kissing Paul's ass. I remember when they had to get a new police chief, and they invited the neighborhood associations in to interview the candidates. And the neighborhood associations had a say. They gave it a say. But you know what? That doesn't always work either. Because I'll tell you something that a lot of people don't know. That $10 fee that Sam Sutter put in place, that $10 fee went before the neighborhood associations, and they said okay. And then they got mad when it happened. You know the purple bags that Will Flanagan put in? He didn't ask anyone. He did it himself. And you got upset about that. So upset that you got him out of office. When Fall River wants to, Fall River can rise up and take back their city. It's time to rise up. If you are asked for a 2.5 override, which remember is permanent, it's permanent. It's permanent. So if you give him an extra $6 million a year, which is what he's going to be seeking, if not more, you've given him that for the life. For life. I personally would say, you know what, Paul? You spent so much money, we're going to vote in a $6 million underride. Do without the extra $6 million. Cut some of your friends. But he won't do that. He'll cut police and fire. He won't cut teachers. They get more money to keep them employed. You need to take back your government. Stop kissing ass. Stop walking around blindly. I can't see it. I got my pothole fixed, so I don't care. I got my sidewalk fixed, so I don't care. Stop that. Are you better off today than you were 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? If you are, more power to you. But if you're not, it's time to say so. And
now,
remember,
you're right, CJ, but I got a suggestion for the superintendent of schools, and I've already said it once, but I'll say it again. Let's hire a superintendent of schools that can run the school department without 6 assistant superintendents.
I agree.
And then a proposed deputy superintendent, because all they know how to do is add more salaries. Look, the superintendent of schools gets over $200,000. So
that's what Paul's making right now.
Why don't you hire a superintendent that for that kind of money, $250,000 or more with the benefits, well over $250,000, even bump it up a little bit because you're going to save 6 salaries. When I went to school, I don't know about you, you went a little after me, but when I went to school, we had a superintendent and an assistant superintendent. That's it. We didn't have 6 of them.
Right.
We only had one. And one of them didn't even have a degree, and they found out that later, right? You remember that one?
I remember that one.
Yeah. So we had an assistant superintendent and a superintendent. Now we got principals and vice principals. We got a whole bunch of superintendents. We don't need 6 assistant superintendents of schools because all that is an employment agency. But there's my suggestion. Hire a superintendent of schools, and with the hiring, also have a review of a performance review every single year of those individuals hired. Find out if our school system is improving. And if it's not, they got some explaining to do. Because let's give them some motivation. You want to keep your job? Here's a novel idea. Do it. Do it. Don't take the job and then hire a whole bunch of people and end up having worse performance. Nobody ever talks about performance in that school. You never hear the school committee. They talk about hiring this one, that one, this program, that program. None of these things work. You're not going to tell me it's not possible to educate children, because they do in a lot of countries. I have a video of the Japanese schools, and their performance is through the roof, but you watch because there is accountability there. Performance. And with that, talking about reality, CJ, I want you to post that link up on our website so people can read it. Watch that New Bedford thing. We got to get it on as many Facebook pages and stuff as we want to let people see somebody standing up and saying, listen, all you people have done is spend money. And so isn't it ironic that it's always the cities that are in the worst financial trouble that have no conception on how to run a budget? But their solution is always just keep paying us, shut up, it's not our fault. Well, we do have some people, we are 336th and 1, but we also have, we're at the bottom 20, 15. But remember, there are people in the top 15. What are they doing right that we're not doing? Does anybody ever say, no, it's all that we're picking on Fall River. The entire educational system of this country is a mess. I mean, we know that. They were talking about, I forgot, I don't know, it's the Rhode Island school system. I think the math was 18% and the English was 21% at grade level. So we're having an issue because throwing money at a problem is not it, and giving these people more money. And any counselor that supports reducing fire and police as the first order of business should not be in office after the next election. And with that, CJ, back.
It's definitely something interesting to consider. And remember, people, when you get asked for a Prop 2.5 override or a debt exclusion, say no, because that's coming out of your pocket, and it's forever. It's that simple. This weekend is Mother's Day weekend. All the mothers out there, please have a wonderful day on Sunday. Happy Mother's Day. And to your mothers that aren't here anymore, please remember them. Think of them. Talk about them. Remember them. We only have one mother. So always remember them. I want to thank you all for watching. And remember, stay safe, stay angry, and hold your politicians accountable. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Happy Mother's Day.